Welcome everyone to build 57. This is actually going back in time a little bit now. This was an interesting build because the components, as you can see, were a little bit older and not super high end, but then we went all out with the custom paint and the mods on the case, which was actually the Phanteks P400, which I questioned the choice by the customer because this case is quite space restricted and radiator capacity limited for liquid cooling. But I hadn't done a build into it before, so for variety's sake, I certainly didn't mind trying it out. But you can see that in the end I could only fit a 360 and a 240 30mm thick radiator, which turned out to be enough to cool the components. There were certainly no temperature issues. But then, like on the mods, the cost was kind of twice as much as a Spectre, because this custom paint job is chrome, and it's an extremely expensive paint job because the chrome itself is $1,500 a litre, but then there are many other layers which are also expensive. So you have to lay down, of course, a primer, then a black base, then a clear coat, then the chrome itself, then a special type of clear coat called a key clear, which kind of flows into the chrome, and then finally a clear coat over the top of that to protect everything. And there has to be big gaps between all of these layers to allow all of the gases to come out of the paints, otherwise it makes the chrome cloudy. So a huge amount of room for error with these chrome paint jobs. The more layers you have, the more room there is for error. So everything has to be done absolutely perfectly to get these paint jobs right. And I did matte black on all of the other panels. So I stripped this case right down to the individual pieces and painted every single one and then riveted it all back together. And I really like doing this, having like a matte color around the components, because it creates like a depth of field effect, and it's very soft and it kind of really silhouettes the components, and then gloss on the outer panels of the case. I actually really like the choices by the customer for this, for the color scheme, like having the chrome and the matte black. It really worked out quite well. So this is a Protium 2 pump res combo. These are actually discontinued now. We have Protium 3. And people kind of asked, why did we go back to the original, similar to Protium 1 pump top design, where on Protium 2 we had this 90-degree pump top design. We did the 90-degree pump top design because it has a lot of benefits. Like, you can vertically mount it without extra mounts. It has so many port options. It creates a lot of flexibility for loop routes, like a lot more than a normal kind of square pump top. But people just constantly kept asking, like, I don't want the 90-degree, I just want to go back to the Protium 1 design. So we ended up, for Protium 3, going back to the Protium 1 design, but just with a lot of tweaks and changes, like improving the mounting, increasing the amount of ports on it, and yeah, a bunch of other things that we learned along the way over the years. But certainly this was an interesting pump top design, and having 3 outlets on the bottom and then inlets up the top, it allowed you to do a lot of different things with the loop route. So you can see how I'm doing a lot of the installations here outside of the case, which certainly makes it a lot easier. Well, actually it makes it possible, because you just wouldn't be able to assemble all of this inside of the case. And it was actually at this point where I realized that things were not going to fit. This case is very tight, and the radiator, the fans, the pump res combo were just too big and actually hit the GPU. So the only choice here was to do another mod. And this is the thing that happens with a lot of these cases that say they are water cooling compatible, but then when you actually try to start installing things, you realize that things are just not going to fit, and you're going to have to modify the case. And it's a lot of work sometimes to actually get these things to work, and it doesn't look like much in the end, but you end up modding a lot of the case just to get it to work the way that you want to. And then it's still a bit limited in many ways, like in this case the radiator capacity. So what I had to do was take the fans off the radiator and put them on the outside, and luckily there is a little bit of space on the outside of this case, but not enough for airflow. So I had to cut a hole in the front panel and put a ventilated section on the front, and that solved the issue. Unfortunately for this build, I didn't shoot building the loop. I don't remember what happened there, but I think my plan was to subject you to a lot of cable management, because yeah, this was one of those builds where I had to spend a lot of time on the cable management, and so I think I had this sadistic plan to make you guys sit through like an hour of just cable management with me, complaining about it. But like, instead of the exciting part, which is building the loop, and that is my favorite part of every build. I love building the loop, and I like modding as well. I like doing custom paint and all of that, but I think planning the loop and building it is always the best part for me. And you can see I went for a fairly fittings intensive loop on this one, because that is what the customer wanted, to get a bit more chrome in there to match up with everything else, the custom paint job. And yeah, the loop actually worked out quite clean and nice, considering that this case is very compact and restrictive. It doesn't look that cramped in the end. So yeah, the cable management for this, I think I spent like a day and a half or something just on. So that's not including sleeving all of the core component cables. That is at least a day, maybe more in itself. But so that's always step one. We build all of the custom cables for the core components, the 24 pin, the EPS, the PCIe, or 12 VH power. And then like day two is installing all of those, managing them, and also building the other custom cables, such as for the pumps, the lights, dealing with the front panel cable mess, and just managing everything. That's step two. Also, the fan cables usually get done up front, because you just can't get to those later. You can see that I had quite a nightmare here getting the EPS cables connected. So this is just another one of those things when cases aren't really designed for radiators and water cooling. So despite using a 240 millimeter radiator at the top that's only 30 millimeters thick, it still comes past. Oh, and I put the fans on the outside. So that was yet another mod that I had to do. So we had to move the front radiator fans to the outside and the top radiator fans to the outside, which required, two fairly substantial mods to get that done. Yeah, the EPS cables still hit the top radiator and were extremely tightly crushed behind it. So I had to kind of remove the top radiator just to get those plugged in. And yeah, that was quite difficult to do. This build also had an Aquero, which is always a lot of extra cable management. There's, a lot of things that need to run to the Aquero. USB, like we're running the pump, the fans. The Aquero is a great device. I always really like the Aquero. The software, there's just nothing like it for setting up fan curves and managing your cooling system. And once it's all set up, it just runs there in the background. You don't actually need to have the software installed anymore or the USB cable connected. All of the information is stored on the Aquero, and you can just rely on it to run everything. Like, it's not like when you do a BIOS update and it clears all of your settings in the BIOS and your fan curves and everything, and then you have to set it all up again. The Aquero is just set it up and forget about it. It's a great device. The sleeve on these cables, by the way, is MDPCX black and liquid carbon. So liquid carbon is one of my favorite colors. I like how MDPCX is doing all these carbon colors now. And the cables are completely handcrafted from the ground up. I also built a flight case for this, and no doubt you guys have seen our flight cases before. I actually build those by hand. Each one takes about 6 to 8 hours to build, because it's like completely hand built from the ground up. It takes a lot of time. I wouldn't actually want to think about the amount of time that goes into a build like this. It probably doesn't look like that much in the end, but with the custom paint, the mods, the hand-built cables, the flight case, like, it is an immense amount of time. And that's why I've put so much time over the years into creating our own cases with integration to try to increase the efficiency of a build, to really speed things up and make things easier.